The Senate will come to order. I ask everyone present to please rise and recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the absence of clergy, may we bow our heads in a moment of silence. Reading of the Journal.
In Senate, Monday, May 19th, the Senate met pursuant to adjournment. The Journal of Friday, May 16th was read and approved. On motion, Senate adjourned.
Without objection, the Journal stands approved as read. Presentation of petitions, messages from the Assembly. Secretary will read. Secretary will read.
On page 12, Senator Martins moved to discharge from the Committee on Local Government Assembly Bill number 8639 and substitute the identical Senate Bill number 6475, third reading calendar 126. On page 12, Senator Martins moved to discharge from the Committee on Local Government Assembly Bill number 8646 and substitute the identical Senate Bill number 6476, third reading calendar 127. On page 17, Senator Flanagan moves to discharge from the Committee on Higher Education Assembly Bill number 121 and substitute for the identical Senate Bill number 6671, third reading calendar 279. On page 30, Senator Bonasek moves to discharge from the Committee on Judiciary Assembly Bill number 9055 and substitute the identical Senate Bill number 7137, third reading calendar 522. On page 33, Senator Avella moves to discharge from the Committee on Health Assembly Bill number 746A and substitute the identical Senate Bill number Senate 328A, third reading calendar 556. On page 33, Senator Ranzenhofer moves to discharge from the Committee on Health Assembly Bill number 4611B and substitute the identical Senate Bill number 2118B, third reading calendar 557. On page 37, Senator Lanza moved to discharge from the Committee on Banks Assembly Bill number 9037A and substitute the identical Senate Bill number 6805B, third reading calendar 597. On page 48, Senator Lanza moved to discharge from the Committee on Cities Assembly Bill number 9578 and substitute the identical Senate Bill number 7257, third reading calendar 707.
Substitutions ordered. Messages from the Governor, reports of standing committees, reports of select committees, communications and reports from state officers, motions and resolutions. Senator Libous.
Mr. President, I guess we at this time we'll go to adopting the resolution calendar with the exception of 5065, 5157 by Senator Parker, 5187 by Senator Savino, 5197 by Senator Perkins, and 5202 by Senator Ball.
All in favor of adopting the resolution calendar with the exceptions identified by the Deputy Majority Leader indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution calendar is adopted. Senator
Thank
Libous.
you, Mr. President. At this time, can we take up Resolution 5065 by Senator Griffo? Please read it in its entirety and call on Senator Griffo.
Secretary will read.
Legislative Resolution number 5065 by Senator Griffo, congratulating the New York Mills High School boys varsity basketball team and Coach Mike Adey upon the occasion of capturing the New York State Public High School Athletic Association Class D Championship. Whereas, excellence and success in competitive sports can be achieved only through strenuous practice, team play, and team spirit, nurtured by dedicated coaching and strategic planning. And whereas athletic competition enhances the moral and physical development of the young people of this state, preparing them for the future by instilling in them the value of teamwork, encouraging a standard of healthy living, imparting a desire for success, and developing a sense of fair play and competition. And whereas this legislative body is justly proud to congratulate the New York Mills High School boys varsity basketball team and Coach Mike Adey upon the occasion of capturing the New York State Public High School Athletic Association's Section 3 Class D Championship. And whereas the New York Mills Marauders basketball team captured their state title by defeating Coleman Catholic High School 57-50 in overtime on Saturday, March 15, 2014 at the Glens Falls Civic Center in Glens Falls, New York. And whereas the athletic talent displayed by this team is due in great part to the efforts of Coach Mike Adie, a skilled and inspirational tutor, respected for his ability to develop potential into excellence. And whereas the team's overall record is outstanding, and the team members were loyally and enthusiastically supported by family, fans, friends, and the community at large. And whereas the hallmarks of the New York Mills High School boys varsity basketball team, from the opening game of the season to participation in the championship, were a brotherhood of athletic ability, of good sportsmanship, of honor, and of scholarship, demonstrating that these team players are second to none. And whereas athletically and academically, the team members have proven themselves to be an unbeatable combination of talents, reflecting favorably on their school. And whereas Coach Mike Adie, Associate Head Coach Brian Adie, and Assistant Coach Chris Richardson have done a superb job in guiding, molding, and inspiring the team members toward their second New York State Public High School Section Scholastic Athletic Association Class D title in 4 years. And whereas sports competition instills the values of teamwork, pride, and accomplishment, and Head Coach Mike Adie, his staff, and his outstanding athletes have clearly made, made a contribution to the spirit of excellence, which is a tradition of their school. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this legislative body pause its deliberations to congratulate the New York Mills boys varsity basketball team, its members, Terrence Nichols, Andrew Supernaught, Zach Griffith, Luke Sunderland, Anthony Casaletta, Nick Comeno, Cameron Lyons, Ben Carroll, Mike Copperwheat, Griffin Bauer, Zach Venaro, Corey Pastorelli, and Ali Hassan. Head Coach Mike Adie, Associate Head Coach Brian Adie, and Assistant Coach Chris Richardson, and team managers George Albert, Tyler Sandala, John Fiore, Jack Lynn, Nate Hartman, Colin Garcia, and Dom Licardo on their outstanding season and overall team record. And be it further resolved that copies of this resolution suitably engrossed be transmitted to New York Mills boys varsity basketball team and Coach Mike Adie and the aforementioned coaches.
Senator Griffo on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to welcome the team here today. It truly was an extraordinary accomplishment because they have captured a number of league titles, sectional titles, and have been in state championships, as you heard, in the last 2 out of 4 years. In fact, I would have liked to have seen him, but the head coach is a little superstitious, so I didn't get to see a game during the season, so I could not go to the state championships. But Senator Little was there to watch both games. In fact, we defeated a team in her district, I think, in the semifinals. But and actually, when they beat Coleman, we have a distinguished alumni of Coleman who's also in the chamber today, the Secretary of the Senate, Frank Patience. So even though you beat Coleman, he still allowed you to sit in the gallery there. So I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary. Really what you're seeing here today, I think, is not only a story of a commitment to excellence in athletics, but it's also an opportunity to see a bunch of young men who have come together under some great supervision and great leadership and their coaching staff to not only master skills that they possess and they're blessed with, but also to learn discipline and to train hard in order to be successful. So as a result of all of that activity, of that commitment, dedication, the energy that they put forth, they were able to achieve great success. And while we're proud of that success, we're equally as proud of what you've become as young adults. Because everything that you've learned, the life skills, the interaction, the sportsmanship, everything that is a part of this great memory that you will bring with you to the rest of your life, something that you will cherish and remember and look upon, it's only the beginning. It's the beginning of a great foundation that's been built to make you great citizens of this community, of this state. And we know that you will be very successful in life because of the accomplishments, not only on the athletic court, but also what you will be able to give back to your communities as you continue to go on and pursue education and careers. So today I want to congratulate each of you for that commitment. It's impressive. They have 7 managers. Senator DeFrancisco, I think that's more than Jim Boeheim has assistant coaches, but 7 managers on the basketball team. I really want to compliment the coaching staff, Assistant Coach Richardson. Brian Adie, who's the associate head coach, is also an employee of the Senate. He is my director of operations and runs all of our district activities. And they have the athletic director here today, Andrea Jekon, Andrea was here once before when we recognized the 3-on-3 national champions. So we have a talented athletic director on the court as well as in the administration of the sports program. And a special thank you to Mike Adey. Mike is an extraordinary individual. He has been an educator throughout his entire career. He's been an athletic director. He's coached at several schools, but he's always put the student first. And he's recognized that these are student athletes, that as much as he wants them to excel on the court and in any type of interscholastic sports, he places an emphasis on academics and on growing as successful contributors and citizens of our community. So, Coach Adey, we're proud of you. You've had an outstanding record. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's been to Glens Falls more than Brian has come to the Capitol, I think. It's an honor to have you all in the chamber today. I would ask that you all stand and ask my colleagues to recognize the Class D state champion New York Mills basketball team.
Senator Little on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. My hometown, Glens Falls, New York, is really proud to host the New York State basketball tournament each year. And it certainly is our own form of March Madness, but it's always exciting. And New York Mills doesn't need any directions getting to Glens Falls, as they've been there many, many times. But I enjoyed watching your game, not so much with the outcome of the Mariah game, but there was never any doubt as to who was going to win that game. You played a great game, and it was fun to watch. It's also great to see such skilled athletes who have worked so hard to achieve this game and to be considered for the state champions in their class. And the game against Coleman was a tough game, but played so well. So congratulations to you. Look forward to seeing you in Glens Falls next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Little. The question is on the resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution is adopted. We want to congratulate the New York Mills boys varsity basketball team, Coach Adey, and your entire staff on your tremendous accomplishment, and hope you are enjoying your day here at the state capitol. Thank you. Senator Libous.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that Senator Ball is not here. You know, I have another announcement that I'd like to make, quite frankly. If I could please have everybody's attention, could I have the doors closed, please? Could I have the doors closed, please? Thank you, Sarge. Today was a very moving and emotional day for all of us. We had the Veterans Hall of Fame, and we met some pretty remarkable people. And one gentleman, I think Senator Stuart Cousins had a gentleman that was 99 years old. I got to meet him. Actually, I got to have lunch with him. So I consider myself pretty lucky. And he was incredible. I chatted with him, and I told him I was from Binghamton. He says, that's where the Susquehanna and Shenango rivers meet. And he knew where Binghamton was. And he told me that he had been there and been to the VFW and the American Legions there. We honored some pretty remarkable people. We have a very remarkable individual that serves with us, and while I certainly wouldn't want to take away from any one person, I want to talk about our colleague, Senator Bill Larkin. Today, not only was he a major part of Senator Ball's Hall of Fame of Veterans, but later in the day, Senator Larkin received a very special honor. He received an honor from the Secretary of the Army, John McHugh. For some of you who don't know, John was once a senator in this chamber, and now he's the Secretary of the Army. And Brigadier General Timothy Tranter came up from West Point to bestow this honor on Senator Larkin today. The Brigadier General came to Albany to present Senator Bill Larkin with the United States Army's Decoration for Distinguished Civilian Service. It is the highest award that the Secretary of the Army can grant a private citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, our own Bill Larkin is a very special and distinguished man. Let's join me in giving him a round of applause.
Senator Larkin, I'm sure every member of this Senate joins me in expressing to you how appreciative we are of your service, but also what it is, that it is a great honor and a privilege for each of us who are senators in this chamber to call you a colleague. So we thank you for your service, we thank you for your leadership, and as Senator Skelos said at the presentation ceremony, when Bill Larkin speaks, everybody listens. Congratulations. Senator Libous.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe Senator Ball has Resolution 5202. He would like it read in its entirety, and if you could please call on Senator Ball for comments.
Secretary will read.
Legislative Resolution Number 5202 by Senator Ball, honoring Purple Heart Homes and its co-founders Dale Beatty and John Galena for their dedicated service to the veterans of their community in the state of New York. Whereas, members of the armed services from the state of New York who have served valiantly and honorably in wars in which this country's freedom was at stake, as well as the preservation of peace in peacetime, deserve a special salute from this legislative body. And whereas, it is the intent of this legislative body to commend those who have served in times of active conflict, as well as those who have served in times of peace. And whereas, attendant to such concern and in full accord with its long-standing traditions, this legislative body is justly proud to honor Purple Heart Homes and its co-founders Dale Beatty and John Galena for their dedicated service to the veterans in their community in the state of New York. And whereas Dale Beatty and John Galena were deployed in January 2004 for a tour with the National Guard Readiness NCO for the Statesville unit. And whereas both were deployed to Iraq in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, where their unit was attached directly to the 1st Infantry Division near Bayya, Iraq. And whereas on November 15, 2004, while on a patrol route highly littered with active insurgent operations, the vehicle Dale Beatty was riding in was hit by anti-tank mines. The explosion was so severe it left him a double amputee below the knees. And whereas Dale Beatty spent over a year at Walter Reed Army Medical Center learning how to walk using prosthetic legs, when he returned home, there were no ramps, elevations, wide doorways, or roll-in showers, all of which contribute to making his life as an amputee truly a challenge. And whereas Reddell Homes Builders Association and many members from the community from Statesville, North Carolina, as well as surrounding areas in an outpouring of support, built a specially adapted barrier-free home for the Beatty family. And whereas, as a result of all the support from his community, Dale Beatty and his fellow soldier, John Galena, wanted to help other service-connected disabled veterans with their housing solutions. Together, they co-founded Purple Heart Homes with funds from their disability checks to help veterans and their caregivers who served in the military. And whereas their journey together is one of friendship, service, courage, and leadership, their shared experiences have created a strong sense of community and have instilled in them a humanitarian spirit to give back and make a difference in the lives of service-connected disabled veterans of all conflicts. And whereas currently the Purple Heart Homes organization is made up of volunteers and professionals who share a common belief and a common desire to give back to those who have given so much for their country. And whereas Purple Heart Homes offers 2 distinct programs for service-connected disabled veterans and their caregivers of all conflicts, the Veterans Aging in Place and the Veteran Home Ownership Program. And whereas the Veterans Aging in Place program is specifically designed to help older service-connected disabled veterans and their caregivers who currently own their home. And whereas the Veteran Home Ownership Program is specifically designed to enable service-connected disabled veterans who do not already own a home become homeowners. And whereas the goal of both programs is to help reintegrate veterans into the community in which they live and to proudly acknowledge the sacrifice they have made on their country's behalf. And whereas whether it is adapting an already owned home, building a home from the ground up, or adapting and modifying a foreclosed home, Purple Heart Homes is committed to guiding the veterans through the entire process. And whereas the ultimate goal of the Purple Heart Homes is to empower the veteran, giving him or her a full complement of skill sets which enables them to be a functioning member of their family, as well as a contributing member of their community. And whereas, having exhibited their patriotism both at home and abroad, Dale Beatty and John Galena have demonstrated their love for their country and merit forevermore. the highest respect of their state and nation. And whereas our nation's veterans deserve to be recognized, commended, and thanked by the people of the state of New York for their service and for their dedication to their communities, their state, and their nation. Now therefore be it resolved that this legislative body pause in its deliberations to honor Purple Heart Homes and its co-founders Dale Beatty and John Galena for their dedicated service to the veterans in their community in the state of New York. And be it further resolved that copies of this resolution suitably engrossed be transmitted to Dale Beatty and John Galena.
Senator Ball on the resolution.
Dale and John are also joined by Vicki Thomas and Joyce Cohen. Also is Eugene Prada, who is a Veterans Hall of Fame honoree and also a Purple Heart recipient. What Dale and John went through is absolutely amazing to think that such a small percentage of our population carries the burden and carries the weight of what is an extraordinary freedom that we appreciate every single day. These guys are from North Carolina, and they have been recognized by CNN. We won't hold that against them, as well as other national and international news media. And they have taken great tragedy and turned it into something beautiful. You know, we do a very good job of getting young men and women to raise that right hand and be willing to fight and die for this country. We don't always do a great job at transitioning those young men and women back into the civilian workplace and back into our civilian way of life that they left to defend all of us. We've got to make sure that we keep America's promise to our veterans, especially our service-disabled veterans. This chamber moved forward in a real substantial way by passing that set aside for service-disabled vets, which is the highest in the country at 6%. But there's still an awful lot of work that needs to be done. So these men and their team stand ready to work with each and every one of you in your district. If you have a veteran, and it can be from World War II, Iraq, Afghanistan, anywhere in between, if you have a veteran who needs help, either a renovation or needs a home built, these men and their team can get that done. I have a man in my district who's a Vietnam vet, and he took shrapnel to the head. When he came back in 1971, he was not welcome home the way he should have been. These men, their team, and my staff came together. This man didn't even have a shower in his home. He was on the verge of losing his home and becoming homeless. And today, because of the work that was done by this community, not only is he going to have a home and help him with a lot of debt that he had, but that home is going to be completely renovated. So thank you so much for your doing. Continue to do God's work. Like you say all the time, Dale and John, we would never leave a buddy behind during wartime, and we sure as hell shouldn't do it back at home when they're back here. So God bless you, and thank you for everything that you guys do. Please stand.
Questions on the resolution? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution is adopted. We welcome our special guests here today, and thank you so much for the work that you do through Purple Heart Homes. Hope you're enjoying your day here in the Capitol. Senator Libous.
Mr. President, I think we need to have Resolution 5187 by Senator Savino at the desk. She would like the resolution read in its entirety, and then if you could call on her, that would be great.
The Secretary will read.
Legislative Resolution Number 5187 by Senator Savino, welcoming the Staten Island Girl Scouts upon the occasion of their visit to Albany, New York on Tuesday, May 20th, 2014. Whereas, it is the sense of this legislative body to act in accord with its long-standing traditions, honoring the youth of today and leaders of tomorrow, whose character and achievements exemplify the ideals and values cherished by this great state and nation. And whereas, attended to such concern and in full accord with its long-standing traditions, this legislative body is justly proud to welcome the Staten Island Girl Scouts upon the occasion of their visit to Albany, New York on Tuesday, May 20th, 2014. And whereas this auspicious visit is part of their biannual trip to the capital of this great Empire State, will include a pizza lunch with the Staten Island members of the legislature, a tour of the Capitol building, recognition in the Senate and Assembly galleries with a resolution and photos on the $1 Million Staircase. And whereas the Staten Island Girl Scouts visiting this year are Amy as a party, Ashley Meladones, Audrey Gallagher, Bryn Hitton, Celine Kelly, Elizabeth Mastoros, Emily Casey, Genevieve Steinmetz, Giovanna Esposito, Jane Ryan, Jessica Orlando, Jessica Rausch, Julia DeSaro, Julia Mendez, Caitlin Casserly, Catherine Cameo, Carrie McCloskey, Lauren Casella, Madeline Jusick, Mary Mastoros, Mary Catherine Brown, Megan Holliday, Miriam Zayed, Nicole Renzetti, Rita Jerome, Sabrina Gallagher, Sarah Rosario, Shay McLaughlin, Sophia DiMartino, Stephanie Caputo, and Celeste Alexander, as well as Scout leader Cheryl McCloskey and chaperones Andrea Gallagher, Annette Orlando, Christine Meladones, Ellen Steerling, Joan Roche, Karen Steinmetz, Nancy Casey, and Nicole Mendez. And whereas Girl Scouting in the United States of America began on March 12, 1912, when Juliet Daisy Gordon Lowe organized the first Girl Scout troop meeting of 18 girls in Savannah, Georgia. Since then, it has grown to 3.7 million members worldwide. And whereas Girl Scouting has cultivated in our nation's young people the goals of building solid values of sisterhood and the importance of working with others, stimulating both mind and body, instilling pride, and encouraging community service and success. And whereas Girl Scouting has expanded the horizons of the countless hundreds of thousands who have participated in scouting programs, which have made scouting an American and international institution. And whereas this legislative body is pleased to recognize the Staten Island Girl Scouts and to wish them a future of purposeful success and well-being. Now therefore be it resolved that this legislative body pause in its deliberations to welcome the Staten Island Girl Scouts upon their occasion of their visit to Albany, New York on Tuesday, May 20th, 2014, and be it further resolved that copies of this resolution suitably engrossed be transmitted to the Staten Island Girl Scouts.
Senator Savino on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of Senator Lanza and myself and the Assembly delegation from Staten Island, Assembly members Michael Cusick, Nicole Malliotakis, Joe Borelli, and Matt Titone, we welcome the Staten Island Girl Scouts here to Albany for what's becoming almost an annual trip, and one that we look forward to every year. And when we do this resolution, we usually talk about the history of the Girl Scouts, and we talk about the history of some of the Girl Scouts who are currently in this chamber. I see Senator Hassel Thompson smiling because she was a Girl Scout when she was young, and I know Senator Stewart Cousins was a Girl Scout, and I think Senator Little was. I myself was not one. We've talked about that in the past. But instead of talking about Girl Scouts from the past and the famous ones, let's talk about what Girl Scouts are doing today, because these are not your grandmother's Girl Scouts anymore. This is a 21st century organization now that is focused on promoting women's health and equality and non-discrimination and well-being. They are focused on how girls should strive for personal and professional knowledge and excellence, both in their own lives and for others. They encourage leadership and educational opportunities for girls. They're interested in getting girls involved in STEM, strengthening financial literacy and entrepreneurial skills. They promote safe and healthy living, civic-mindedness, diversity, support for thriving nonprofit community. They are truly a 21st century organization, and we are thrilled to have them here with us as they tour the state capitol. Every year through the Girl Scouts Advocacy Network, they're developing federal and state legislative agendas, which is why they're not allowed to give us cookies anymore. It's considered lobbying. They're prohibited from doing so. But we appreciate it anyway. So as we end this legislative session, and we're not that far away, let's not forget the young women who are going to come after us. Let's not forget the young women who help lead these troops. The President of the Senate read off the names, but I just want to name them again. The leader, Cheryl McCloskey, Karen Steinmetz, Joan Roche, Nancy Casey, Andrea Gallagher, Annette Orlando, Christine Meladones, Ellen Steering, and Nicole Mendez. The Girl Scouts are able to continue because of women who were Girl Scouts and give of their own time to make sure the next generation becomes Girl Scouts and they thrive at it. So thank you for coming. Congratulations on all of your achievements. Many of you have won gold awards since last year, and you're working on silver and bronze awards. Some of you have won Religious Marian medals from St. Patrick's Cathedral. You are truly a remarkable bunch of young women, and we in Staten Island are very proud of each and every one of you. Welcome to Albany.
The question is on the resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution is adopted. A special welcome to our Girl Scouts from Staten Island. Hope you're enjoying your day. Senator Libous.
Yes, Mr. President. Resolution number 5157 by Senator Parker is at the desk. Could we read it in its entirety and call on Senator Parker?
Yeah. Secretary will read.
Legislative Resolution number 5157 by Senator Parker, commemorating the 60th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education, the landmark United States Supreme Court decision that ended school segregation. Whereas it is the custom of this legislative body to recognize those milestones and significant events which represent turning points in our unique history, which are indelibly etched in the saga of our great nation. And whereas attended such concern in full accord with its long-standing traditions, this legislative body is justly proud to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, the landmark United States Supreme Court decision that ended school segregation. And whereas on May 17, 1954, the United States Supreme Court unanimously ruled that separate but equal public schools for blacks and whites were unconstitutional. And whereas this landmark decision helped serve as a catalyst for the more modern civil rights movement, inspiring education reforms across the nation and providing a basis for legal challenges to segregation in all areas of society. And whereas Brown versus Board of Education was a consolidation of anti-segregation court cases from 5 different jurisdictions and included Brown versus Board of Education in Kansas, Briggs versus Elliott, South Carolina, Bula versus Gebhardt and Benton versus Gebhardt in Delaware, Davis versus County School Board of Prince Edward County, Virginia, and Bowling versus Sharp, District of Columbia. And whereas the smaller cases were combined as part of a legal movement to remedy the grossly inadequate conditions in segregated black schools, they sought to overturn the infamous 1896 case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which had permitted racial segregation under the guise of separate but equal. And whereas the Supreme Court's Brown decision was particularly important for how it focused on the illegality of segregation itself, the court ruled that even if tangible factors like facilities, teachers, and supplies were equal, separation itself was inherently unequal in a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. And whereas the Supreme Court's unanimous opinion concluded that a quality education was crucial for all children and ruled that it was the state's responsibility to ensure educational equality, the court also noted that segregation has a detrimental effect upon children of color and that the impact is more profound when it has sanction of the law. And whereas after Brown versus Board of Education, the nation made great strides toward opening the doors of education to all students with court orders and active enforcement of federal civil rights laws. Progress toward integrated schools continued to move forward. More work is needed, however, to ensure educational achievement and opportunity for all. And whereas equal access to educational opportunities in our nation's public schools is vitally important to both the social and economic well-being of our nation, as well as the success of our democracy as a whole. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this legislative body pauses deliberations to commemorate the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, the landmark United States Supreme Court decision that ended school segregation.
Senator Parker on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the resolution, as probably many of you know, this past Saturday was the 60th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. And as we know, Brown ended legal segregation in schools in America. But Brown was actually much more than that. After Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, the Supreme Court had declared that as long as, and this is quotes, as long as the separate facilities were equal, segregation did not violate the U.S. Constitution, unquote. In America of the 1890s and through 1950, schools were segregated, trains, buses were all segregated, restaurants and stores were segregated, so on and so forth. Much of public life had iron walls of legal and physical separation between the races, not only between blacks and whites, but from everyone. Brown was not only just a case of 13 parents in Topeka, Kansas, suing to let their children go to the white school rather than walk 6 blocks through a dangerous train yard. Brown was not just about the South. Of the 5 cases that were combined in the Brown decision, one was filed in Washington, D.C., one was filed in Delaware, and the other one was filed in Kansas. Only 2 of Brown cases were found in the former Confederate states of the South. As we know, the court's decision made it very clear, in fact, crystal clear, that not only were racially segregated school system of the day unequal and illegal, but segregation school could never be equal and therefore violated the U.S. Constitution. The road to that day 60 years ago, when the foundations of legal inequality in this country were shattered, was paved by the sacrifice of heroic parents, families, and community. On that day after the victory, the struggle for full racial equality began when brave young African-American children began enrolling in all-white schools despite the promise of violence and threats of death. Today, our community's children go to schools together, work together, live together, and have no memory of the too recent past when racial discrimination was the law of the land. We have come way too far, and our solidarity will continue to win important progressive victories for all of us. 60 years ago, Brown versus Board of Education began the end of racial discrimination and reminded all Americans of the promises inherent in our U.S. Constitution. Brown also began the end of discrimination in Americans based on gender, ethnicity, religious, national origin, sexual orientation, age, and disability, and for that, we are truly thankful. But we are not finished yet. Many of our schools, despite as far we come, still at this moment continue to be very segregated. In fact, New York City still is one of the most segregated cities in the entire country, and our schools reflect that. And so I want us all to take this moment to rededicate ourselves to living towards the promise of what Brown versus Board of Education gave us, which is, again, a place where we all can work and live together. And so please also join me in thanking the brave families that fought for Brown versus Board of Education and in the movement of praise and solidarity for the millions of Americans over the past 60 years who have worked to oppose all types of discrimination across our country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Parker. The question is on the resolution. Senator Perkins on the resolution.
Thank you very much. I want to take an opportunity to speak on this resolution, and I really want to commend my colleague for those eloquent words and reciting of the history of this very, very important piece of this change in our country. It's my honor to partner with Senator Parker in sponsoring this very important resolution, which chronicles a very short yet entirely clarion Supreme Court decision that considered the question, what is equality? The brilliance of the Brown decision was not about fine points of law or the intent of the drafters and ratifiers of the 14th Amendment. It was a decision that was about humanity, about hearts and minds, about a sense of what is right for our communities, for the holistic development of our young children. It was a decision that established a principle that we still seek to achieve: integrated, equal educational programs for all. 6 decades later, we are still without the full measure of desegregation and integration that was promised, and in practice has been pursued at a pace that is deliberate but not characterized by all due speed. In fact, here in New York, we have substantial levels of de facto segregation in our schools, with dense and isolated concentrations of Black and Latino children in the same schools, and what can only be called a correlation. The educational outcomes of our children in these segregated schools are widely disparate as well. In addition, instead of reforming the whole system, we have created additional segregated educational facilities called charter schools. These schools are inherently unequal and essentially practice a form of educational apartheid where there's not even equality in terms of, quote, tangible resources, end quote, due to the privatization of public education. For instance, in my district below 96th Street, you have public schools that are good enough for the children in those neighborhoods to attend, and then above 96th Street, you have public schools that are not good enough for the children to attend. So we've created, quote, charter schools, which former Mayor Bloomberg called, quote, private schools for children of color. These charter schools, on an uneven and unequal playing field, draw resources away from the traditional public schools, thus exacerbating negative outcomes for children of color primarily. Conclusively, inequalities abound in a way that the Warren Court could never have imagined. In 1954, the court held that education is a right that must be made available on equal terms. That's a mandate that we are still striving to achieve, and only wholesale reform of our educational system will get us there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. Are there any other senators who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the question, Senator Diaz on the resolution.
Thank you. I take this opportunity to join the resolution. However, I have to strongly express my objection to the observation made by my colleague Perkins about charter schools. Charter schools, I always say, are God sends to our community. Charter schools are open in Black and Hispanic neighborhoods. Charter school has been the solution to our children that have been left behind. So when my colleague Senator Perkins speaks about trying to make charter school look evil, I have to object to that. Charter school, again, were the solution for Black and Hispanic children that were left behind by the regular system, and that the education, they were not getting a good education. Now with charter school, they are getting a good education. They have a great future, and I just had to express my objection to Senator Perkins' observation on charter school. However, I am here to support this resolution and proudly congratulate the sponsor of the resolution.
Thank you, Senator Diaz. The question is on the resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution is adopted. Senator Libous.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe Resolution 5197 by Senator Perkins is at the desk. Could we have it read in its entirety, and please call on Senator Perkins.
Secretary will read.
Legislative Resolution number 5197 by Senator Perkins, commemorating the 89th birthday of Malcolm X, a singular human rights activist and one of the world's most influential African-American leaders in history. Whereas it is a sense of this legislative body to recognize and commend individuals and events which celebrate our nation's great struggle to fulfill the promise of equality and opportunity for all. And whereas attended such concern and in full accord with its long-standing traditions, this legislative body is justly proud to commemorate the 89th birthday of Malcolm X, a singular human rights activist and one of the most influential African-American leaders in history. And whereas Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska on May 19, 1925. And whereas on January 14, 1958, Malcolm X married Betty Sanders and they had 6 children. And whereas once a member of the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X was a Muslim minister, public speaker, and human rights activist. To his admirers, he was a courageous advocate for the rights of African Americans in the face of institutionalized racism. And whereas, after his departure from the Nation of Islam, Malcolm X founded Muslim Mosque, Inc. and the Organization of Afro-American Unity. He then became a Sunni Muslim, and after his holy pilgrimage to Mecca, he became El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. And whereas Malcolm X's pilgrimage to Mecca, Saudi Arabia, proved life-altering, and for the first time, he shared his thoughts and beliefs with different cultures. and found the response to be overwhelmingly positive. And whereas when he returned to the United States, Malcolm X mentioned that while he was abroad, he had met men of all races that he could call his brothers. He also returned to the United States with a new outlook on the African American struggle for equality, a new message for all mankind, and a new hope for the future. And whereas on February 21, 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated while giving a lecture in the Audubon Ballroom in New York City, which was subsequently designated as a landmark and currently houses the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Memorial and Educational Center. And whereas in 1987, in honor of the slain civil rights leader, Lenox Avenue in Harlem, New York City was named after Malcolm X. And whereas in January 1999, family and friends of Malcolm X gathered at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York to witness the U.S. Postal Service announce the debut of the new Malcolm X postage stamp. The 33-cent commemorative stamp is a 22nd stamp in the Postal Service's Black Heritage series. The U.S. Postal Service declared that Malcolm X was one of the most influential black leaders of the 1960s, and that he shaped the debate around race relations and strategies for social change. Now, therefore, be resolved that this legislative body pauses deliberations to commemorate the 89th birthday of Malcolm X, a singular human rights activist and one of the most influential African-American leaders in history.
Senator Perkins on the resolution.
Thank you very much. Today we honor a man who built a bridge from the civil rights movement here in the United States to the human rights movement across the entire world. Malcolm X was a true visionary leader who saw the palpable universal connection between the systemic disempowerment and discrimination of African American people here and the States and in scores of other nations throughout our global populace. He was a freedom fighter in the truest sense of the phrase, a man who was, quote, outspoken in the pursuit of justice in the most noble way that one human being can be by standing up for the rights of all others. He was the consummate believer in the unconquerable value of freedom, and his philosophy of life experiences taught him that one often had to wage war for it and be prepared to die for it. He said, quote, when a person places the proper value on freedom, there is nothing under the sun that he or she will not do to acquire that freedom. Whenever you hear a man or woman saying he wants freedom, but in the next breath he or she is going to tell you what he or she won't do to get it, or what he or she doesn't believe in doing in order to get it, he or she doesn't believe in freedom. A man who believes in freedom will do anything under the sun to acquire or preserve his or her freedom, end quote. Malcolm X is one of the greatest and most distinguished revolutionaries this world has ever known. He was inspired countless generations, movements, world leaders, students, scholars, social activists, and freedom fighters. One of the great causes that he inspired is known as the December 12th Movement, founded in 1827 in Newburgh, New York. This worldwide movement carries forth Malcolm's universal notion that the conditions that black people suffer in the United States are inextricably linked to the conditions of Africans worldwide, with the common denominator that there is an economic basis to racism, slavery, and neo-slavery, meaning mass incarceration. Every May 19th for the past 22 years in my district on 125th Street, members of the December 12th movement canvassed the neighborhood chanting his name. Quote, you say Malcolm, I say X. Malcolm X, Malcolm X. End of chant. In a show of unity, local shopkeepers closed their businesses for a few hours to a chorus of, quote, no disrespect, shut them down, end quote. This is so everywhere, everyone can truly take a few hours on the birthday of Malcolm X to cherish his legacy, remember his words, teachings, and the cardinal cause that drove him, and recommit to the fight for freedom. This year, I am extremely proud to say our youth was heavily involved in this expressive act of remembrance which now spans multiple generations. In closing, I must solemnly remark that yesterday, on the 89th birthday of Malcolm X, we lost one of his greatest foot soldiers, defenders, and protectors, Elambe Bragg, a founder of the December 12th movement, a true Harlem nationalist and profound Pan-African. Both men, given the lives they lived and the values they held, are worthy of our collective emulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perkins. Senator Sanders on the resolution.
Mr. President, first I want to commend Senator Perkins for realizing and stating and having us all recognize the 89th birthday of Malcolm X. I just wish to offer him a friendly amendment. You were kind enough to say that he was one of the most influential black leaders of the 20th century. I just would suggest to you that we call him one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century. Well, now the friendly amendment has been accepted with the spirit that the senator has shown. Some may say that Malcolm died, but I would argue that he didn't die. In fact, I would argue that his spirit was just alive in a room that I was with some young people downstairs. Some members of the Fortune Society had come before me, and they were very young people. I don't know, 20-ish, younger. And they had fallen afoul of the law, and they had served their time in trying to redo themselves, and they were trying to find a roadmap. How do you pay your debt to society and yet turn into something productive, something constructive? And we were able to communicate, and I was able to show them that someone had done worse than they did. Someone had went to jail and was such a horrible person in jail that he was known as Satan. Horrible, he called himself one of the most worst degenerates that could be, and yet was able to recreate themselves into a very moral, uplifting person, a model that this country can look to proudly. And I would suggest to you, by using this model, I was able to speak to these young people and say that, hey, you need to study. If you're looking for a roadmap, there's one right there. There's a person who sank further than you and yet rose higher than any of us in here. And under those conditions, I would suggest to you that no, Malcolm didn't die, as long as we are using his image, his ability to change people's lives into something better, and that it is also interesting and perhaps fitting that Elambe passed on that day, knowing Elambe he would have it no other way. In one sense, you could say he had the last laugh at this. Having said those things, I again want to start where I want to end rather where I started, by thanking the senator for bringing this important issue to the floor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Senator Parker on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President, on the resolution. First, let me begin and adding my voice to those who are thanking and praising Senator Perkins for his leadership on this resolution and recognizing yesterday, May 19th, as Malcolm X's birthday. This 89th birthday is a milestone, and important because as we think about Malcolm X's legacy and his life, that much of what he taught, much of what he fought for, are still relevant lessons today. There's four things, to keep it short, that I want to just point on that Malcolm X contributed not just to African American culture and history, but things that we've learned as Americans. And the first is courage in the face of power. Malcolm X, in particular, in the context of what he was fighting for, to be able to speak truth to power in the way that he did was really one of the first times that African Americans saw that. And I was kind of saying Dr. King because him and Dr. King were oftentimes pitted against each other intellectually, although never had the kind of problems that we like to believe that they have. And in fact, I was telling somebody yesterday, those of you who are going to go to see the X-Men movie this weekend, that I would argue to you that the difference that you see between Professor X and Magneto is the Dr. King, Malcolm X dichotomy in terms of intellectual argument about how races of people ought to be moving forward. So we thank Stan Lee for, whitewashing the story, but also putting it on the screen. So, we'll figure that out later. But this notion of courage and speaking truth to power, Malcolm X did in a way that almost no one else did. And not just, in the community, but, debated professors at Harvard University, went on television and debated all of the great journalists of the time. And I think that was an important thing to see for the first time. It's now commonplace to see that. But remember, in the 50s and 60s, that was not commonplace to see African Americans standing up for themselves and speaking raw truth to power. Second thing was the notion of African culture and African Americans coming out of a African diasporic understanding. And sometimes, that's just something that still hasn't taken full root. But he was one of the first people in kind of a broad way to, in fact, talk about, and this is a kind of a dialectical thing, but talk about blacks as Africans. And he often said that that part of the problem that African Americans had is that they hated themselves. That in fact, they were taught to hate Africa, and so by extension, because they hated Africa, they hated themselves. He said, how could you in fact hate the roots of a tree and then not hate the tree itself? Right? And one of my favorites, he said, you understand just because we were born in America don't make us Americans. Right? A cat having kittens in the oven don't make them biscuits. Right? That's what Malcolm used to say. And so that despite our years here, that we continue to be African people. Third, and Senator Sanders talked about this very eloquently, is this notion of transformation. And almost anything else, if you read the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley, one of the things that you get out of that is exactly the point that Senator Sanders spoke to, which is the transformation of Malcolm X from a dastardly criminal, even by his own words, to one of the most significant spiritual and political and social leaders this country has ever seen. And the notion of, and that story has been important for people in our community who have said and read that book and said, if he could do it, then I also then see I can do it in myself. And that's been an important contribution of Malcolm X. And lastly is that he always continued to elevate himself and evolve. Only other person I would say, in the context of African culture and history that you see in America who has that level of evolution is W.E.B. Du Bois, right? Who, when you read from Souls to Black Folks to his later works and him leaving the United States and going to live in Ghana, over the 95 years that he lived, he's a different person almost every 10 years. He talks about the talented 10th, and then he goes back and says, the talent, I wasn't right when I said that, right? And then you see in the Du Boisian metaphor, Malcolm X having that same kind of evolution. Going from this kind of country, living in Detroit and in Boston and becoming this gangster in New York, going to jail, and then as he becomes involved in the Nation of Islam and then becomes a minister for the nation and becomes a very, influential political and social leader, continues to evolve from that understanding to an understanding where he makes Hajj and then starts to see an international connection of oppression and starts to see beyond just the racial categories that we get caught up in of black and white and those kind of basic things, to start really speaking to people's conditions. And so, as he dies in a movement in which he's trying to unite people in the world, black, white, blue, green, Muslims, Christians, right? He broke out of the bounds of the categories that we like to place ourselves in. And I think that it's a lesson for all of us, and hope that I am also able to make those kind of evolutions evolutionary changes in my life, to be here as not just a member of this body, but a member of the state of New York, a member of my community, a member of the world that finds new and innovative ways to unite our community such that we continue to build the world that we all like to see our children grow up in. And so as we remember Malcolm X, we should remember these things, courage. We should remember him, in terms of pride in African culture, him being a transformational leader, but then also someone who always continued to evolve. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Parker. Senator Montgomery on the resolution.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. I rise to also thank my colleague, Senator Perkins, for introducing this resolution, which gives us an opportunity to be reminded and to speak about this great leader, El Haj Malik Shabazz, Malcolm X. And I think as we're talking about him, I'm reminded of Martin Luther King, and I'm reminded of Paul Robeson before him, and I'm reminded of, obviously, Malcolm X. When at one point I heard Percy Sutton speak about his friendship with Malcolm X, he said that there was no church in Harlem that would agree to accept his body and to host a funeral for him. And I thought about that, and I remember that I attended the funeral of Paul Robeson, and there were very few people at this funeral. He had a very small funeral. A man who was larger than life had very few people. And in those times that Martin Luther King was down there in Alabama and Mississippi and Georgia and marching up and down the highways and the roadways and pushing through and in prison, fighting for the civil rights of people, a whole group of people in this nation, there were those who castigated him, and they called him foolish, and he should wait and be patient and take time, and why couldn't he just chill out a little bit and just wait. So now we celebrate Malcolm X, and thankfully there are boulevards and streets and buildings across the country that carry the name of Martin Luther King and that carry the name of Malcolm X. And hopefully we have some recognition of Paul Robeson as well. But those great leaders, I just am reminded today that it's only now after they have gone that we feel empowered to speak about them and that we can talk about them even in this house. So I'm very proud of that. I understand how history works, what happens, because we've had so many cases, so many instances, so many of our great leaders who have had the same experience. But now, thankfully, we can stand here to say, in no uncertain terms, that this was a great leader, that he was a leader for people of color in this country, but he was also a leader of people who were powerless. And so, as my colleague, Senator Parker, has said, he had the courage to stand up when many of us didn't, as many of these great leaders that we talk about today did when they were doing it, and we were not able to do it. But today we are, and I thank you, Senator Perkins, for giving us this opportunity to remind ourselves that we need to speak up for the greatness of these men, and especially this man, Malcolm X, today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Montgomery. Senator Peralta on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to first thank Senator Perkins for this resolution and just give a little bit of trivia. Malcolm X lived in the United Nations of all Senate districts in East Elmhurst. That happens to be the 13th senatorial district, for those of you who don't know. Malcolm X lived in a small home in East Elmhurst. And on February 15th, his home, located at 2311 97th Street, was firebombed. And he was able to wake up his family at 2:30 in the morning and escape. And he left to Chicago at that point. But he was quoted on that day when the press asked him, "What are you going to do about this? Who was behind it?" He says, "It doesn't frighten me. It doesn't quiet me down in any way or shut me up." Unfortunately, on February 21st, he was shot down in an Audubon ballroom. Malcolm X, or as he was known prior to Malcolm X, Malcolm Little, was quoted as saying, "A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything." Malcolm was willing to die to defend his principles and his beliefs. He was also quoted as saying, "Wrong is wrong, no matter who says it or who does it. Wrong is wrong." When he was alive, he was misunderstood. People didn't understand what he was trying to say, what he was trying to preach. Now, people understand what he was trying to say. Now, people praise what he was trying to do, the courage he had to stand up when no one was standing up. Malcolm stood for justice. He stood for equality. He stood for dignity. He stood for respect. He wanted an America just like Martin Luther King wanted in America, to live up to his creed. Let's remember Malcolm X and what he stood for, because this is an individual that had courage to stand up for what was right at a time when not too many people were doing it. So thank you, Senator Perkins.
Thank you, Senator Peralta. Senator Hassel Thompson on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to congratulate Senator Perkins on putting forth this resolution. A lot of the things that I had thought about to say have been said, but one point that I think that becomes important. I appreciate the fact that we have evolved as a state and certainly as a chamber, whereas we can speak the name Malcolm X, and that the history books for which this resolution will become a part of will speak more kindly of him than it did during his lifetime. I had the opportunity to know him, but more to know his wife and his children. And I worked with two of his daughters, and very recently I saw Malaka, all of whom these children are continuing to suffer great trauma because of the life that they lived as the daughters of Malcolm X. But each time that I see Ilyasa, she says, "It is easier because now the world doesn't hate my father." And so as we stand here in this chamber, hopefully we can help them heal. As we help the world to understand that he was one of the most misunderstood, and that wasn't because he was hard to understand, but the world wanted him to be misunderstood. The world was not ready for the kind of unification that he tried to preach and believe. He evolved in his own life from hate to love and understanding. And so as we stand here today and to remember and remind, I am grateful for that evolution. Because the soldier that I honored today, who died 3 weeks before he was able to receive his was an Italian gentleman. And his life helped me to evolve, to accept and be a part of a community that is so diverse, and be able to take some of the anger and hate that righteously I have a right to feel and put it aside, because I don't want the next generation to hate in the same way that we have in the past. So I congratulate you, Senator Perkins, for making sure that every year on his birthday, that we all help the healing process of hate in this country. And we understand that you grow to be great by enlightenment and love. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hassel-Thompson. Are there any other senators who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the question is on the resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution is adopted. Senator Laval.
Where do we go next? Mr. President, take up previously adopted resolution number 46 by Senator Kennedy. Read the title only, and Senator Kennedy will speak on that resolution.
Secretary will read the title of Resolution 4674.
Legislative Resolution number 4674 by Senator Kennedy, commending the Buffalo Junior Chamber of Commerce upon the occasion of their designation for special recognition by the New York State Junior Chamber of Commerce Board.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's with great pleasure that I rise today to commend Buffalo's Junior Chamber of Commerce for their outstanding work and for receiving special statewide recognition. Founded in 1932, the Buffalo Junior Chamber of Commerce is a premier leadership training organization for young people ages 21 to 40 in Buffalo and Western New York. For over 75 years, this enterprising group has made a positive difference in the lives of their fellow Western New Yorkers through community service, professional development, and civic engagement. Commonly known as the Buffalo JCs, the Buffalo Junior Chamber of Commerce was honored with several awards from the New York State Junior Chamber of Commerce earlier this year. In addition to being named Outstanding Local Chapter, the Buffalo JC's individual awards included Outstanding Individual Vice President, Lindsay Krug. Outstanding Vice President of International Affairs, Joe Rembold. Outstanding Local Chapter Officer, Emily Ellett. Outstanding Very Important Partner, Jeremy Lawbacker. Outstanding Public Relations, C.J. Maurer. And Outstanding Vice President of Community Relations, Samantha Calabrese. This organization's strong belief in giving back, their commitment to developing community leaders, and their selfless humanitarian spirit have benefited the Buffalo community in so many ways for so many years. Recently, the Buffalo JCs provided key support for Buffalo's Undy 5000, which raises funds and awareness to combat colon cancer. They regularly participate in the Allentown Litter Mob, a program that aims to boost community pride through regular street cleanups. They partnered with the International Institute of Buffalo through the Open World Leadership Center and hosted young professionals from Russia. It was part of an exchange program to spur meaningful dialogue and potential economic opportunities for young professionals from around the world. They provide critical networking opportunities for Buffalo's young and aspiring and foster the type of can-do attitude necessary to sustain Buffalo's resurgent growth. They've made an immense impact through Buffalo and Western New York. These young people are part of a growing movement of millennials who are staying in or moving back to Buffalo. The number of people aged 20 to 34 living in Buffalo has shot upward by over 10%, outpacing both state and federal levels. It's a reversal of the so-called brain drain, and groups like the Buffalo Junior Chamber of Commerce are one important force behind the brain gain that we are experiencing in Western New York. Congratulations and thank you to the Buffalo JCs. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kennedy. This resolution was adopted on April 29th. Senator Laval.
reports of standing committees.
The Secretary
I believe
will,
there is a report of the Finance Committee at the desk.
the Secretary will read the report of the Finance Committee.
Senator DeFrancisco from the Committee on Finance reports the following nominations. Members of the Republic Airport Commission, Stella M. Barbera of Lindenhurst and Robert W. Bowden-Miller of West Babylon.
Senator DeFrancisco.
Yes, each of the nominees' were discussed or proposed in the Senate Finance Committee this morning. Unanimously recommended, we unanimously recommended that this be brought to the floor for a vote, and I now move the nomination of each of these fine people.
The question is on the nominations of Stella Barbera and Robert Bowden-Miller as members of the Republic Airport Commission. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Stella Barbera and Robert Bowden-Miller are hereby confirmed as members of the Republic Airport Commission. Senator Laval.
Mr. President, we just pause for a brief period here.
The Senate will pause briefly. Senator Laval.
Yes. Can we stand at ease for a bit?
The Senate will stand at ease. '02 by Senator Little. Could we please read the title and call on Senator Little? Secretary will read the title of Senate Resolution 5002.
Legislative Resolution Number 5002 by Senator Little, memorializing Governor Andrew M. Cuomo to proclaim May 18 to 25, 2014 as Fibromyalgia Awareness Week in the state of New York.
Senator Little on the previously adopted resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. And once again, I thanked Governor Cuomo for naming this week as Fibromyalgia Awareness Week. I've had the privilege of speaking on this resolution before, and I'll do so again briefly. As you know, there are 10 million people in the United States who are affected by fibromyalgia, and the number is increasing. It is a disease of debilitating, widespread pain and fatigue, and for your friends, family, or constituents who may have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, the treatment is usually learn to live with it, because there is no cure or real treatment for fibromyalgia. We are fortunate, though, that we are making significant progress in the research that's being done on fibromyalgia. And joining us in the gallery today, we have some folks from Albany Med and people who are involved in this. There are several organizations, certainly there is the National Fibromyalgia Association, which works at providing information and education to physicians so that they are better able to deal with patients who are presented with this diagnosis, and also to be able to diagnose them quicker than it has been in the past. We have several other international organizations, the Institute for Human Empowerment, the Integrated Tissue Dynamics, which is here in Rensselaer, and the National Fibromyalgia Chronic Pain Association. We have the founder and executive director, Dr. Susan Shippey, of the Fibromyalgia Task Force, and we're joined by Dr. Rice and Dr. Albrecht from Albany Medical, who are doing a lot of research and testing, trying to come up with a better cure and some kind of treatment for fibromyalgia. Through their awareness, their advocacy, and their action, we are making progress, and I wish them the best as they continue their efforts, and would ask my colleagues to support them and all the organizations working towards this. But our focus this week is to increase awareness on what fibromyalgia is and the need for more research and better treatment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Little. And again, this resolution was approved earlier this afternoon. We welcome our special guest to the chamber today. Senator Libous.
Take up the non-controversial calendar.
The secretary will read.
Calendar number 126 by member of the Assembly Wiesenberg, Assembly Print 8639, enacted on the real property tax law.
Read the last section. The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 127 by member of the Assembly Wiesenberg, Assembly Print 8646, enacted amend the real property tax law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 279 by member of the Assembly Nolan, Assembly Print 121, enacted amend the educational.
The bill is laid aside for the day.
Calendar number 350 by Senator Flanagan, Senate Print 4188, enacted amend the vehicle and traffic law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this statute take effect on the 120th day.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 391 by Senator Ranzanoff for Senate Print 6981, enact amend the Facilities Development Corporation Act.
Read the last section.
Section 2, the statute take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 421 by Senator D. Francisco, Senate Print 6482, enact amend the State Finance Law.
Read the last section. Bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 426 by Senator Bonasek, Senate Print 7077A, enact to amend the Estates, Powers, and Trust Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, the statute take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 428 by Senator Gallivan, Senate Print 762, enact amend the Alcoholic Beverage Control Law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 469 by Senator Savino, Senate Print 3677A, enact amend the Penal Law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 518 by Senator Boyle, Senate Print 6828, enact amend the Highway Law.
Read the last section.
Section 3, the statute take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin.
Senator Boyle to explain his vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. To explain my vote, I'd like to urge everyone, and myself included, to vote in favor of this bill. Corey Swinson Memorial Bridge. Corey was the youngest of 10 children and a graduate of Bayshore High School. He played college basketball and football and was drafted by the NFL in 1995. Spending preseason with the Miami Dolphin roster, and in the same year played tackle for the St. Louis Rams, defensive tackle. He then embarked on a career in personal security protecting A-list athletes and celebrities. However, Corey always felt drawn to the field of education, a field in which he had continued to contribute to the betterment of young people. He returned to Long Island, where he coached football at his alma mater, Bayshore High School. In 2002, Corey joined Bayshore Schools as a director of security. And if you saw the size of Corey, you'd know why he was the director of security. Huge guy. He quickly established a reputation as one of Long Island's most respected voices in school safety. In 2012, Corey assumed the position of director of security for the Copiague School District. Corey was a dedicated single father and is survived by his mother, Carrie Swinson, his siblings, Robert, Betty, Gwen, Ernie, Eugenia, Pam, Lisa, Paula, David, and Matthew, and for an ever-increasing assortment of nieces and nephews. Corey was also fortunate to have a wonderful extended family, consisting of his lifelong friends who we met over 42 years in the Bayshore Brightwaters community. We lost Corey far too soon. This bridge will memorialize the life of Corey Swinson and will serve to commemorate the heartfelt community service and dedication that Corey provided to our Bayshore Brightwaters community. I vote strongly in the affirmative. Thank you.
Senator Boyle, to be recorded in the affirmative, announce the results.
Ayes 60.
Bill is passed.
Calendar number 519 by Senator Gallivan, Senate Print 6842, enact amend the highway law.
Read the last section.
Section 3, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 522 by Member of the Assembly Buckwald, Assembly Print 9055, enact amend the Surrogate Courts Procedure Act.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 525 by Senator Bonasek, Senate Print 7143, enact amend the Civil Practice Law and Rules.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 536 by Senator Marcelino, Senate Print 3854A, enact amend the tax law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 551 by Senator Laval, Senate Print 1650A, enact amend.
The bill is laid aside for the day.
Calendar number 552 by Senator Laval, Senate Print 4469A, enact amend the education law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 553 by Senator Hannan, Senate Print 5060A, enact amend the education law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 556 by Member of the Assembly Rosenthal, Assembly Print 746A, enact amend the public health law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 557 by Member of the Assembly Schimminger, Assembly Print 4611B, enact amend the public health law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 560 by Senator Hannan, Senate Print 4509, enact amend the social services law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 567 by Senator Hannan, Senate Print 7163, enact amend the public health law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 574 by Senator Bonasek, Senate Print 2040A, enact amend the penal law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 576 by Senator Golden, Senate Print 2174, enact amend the civil rights law.
Read the last section.
Section 6, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 59, nays 1. Senator Perkins recorded in the negative.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 589 by Senator Marcelino, Senate Print 1520, enact amend the penal law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect on the 1st of November.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
The bill is passed.
Relation to calendar 589. Ayes 59, nays 1. Senator Perkins recorded in the
The
negative.
bill is passed.
Calendar number 597 by Member of the Assembly Robinson, Assembly Print 9037A, enact amend the banking law.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 603 by Senator Valesky, Senate Print 4652A, enact amend the general business law.
The bill is laid aside for the day.
Calendar number 614 by Senator Bonasek, Senate Print 7019, enact amendment Chapter 473 of the laws of 2010.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 627 by Senator Marcelino, Senate Print 6973A, enact amendment the environmental conservation law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 59, nays 1. Senator Ball recorded in the negative.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 628 by Senator Ranzanoff, Senate Print 6978, enact amend Chapter 307 of the laws of 2005.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 59, nays 1. Senator Ball recorded in the
The
negative.
bill is passed.
Calendar number 629 by Senator Martin, Senate Print 6982A, enact amend the environmental conservation law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 59, nays 1. Senator Ball recorded in the
The
negative.
bill is passed.
Calendar number 630 by Senator Martin, Senate Print 6983A, enact amend the environmental conservation law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, D. Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 58, nays 2. Senators Ball and Laval recorded in the negative.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 631 by Senator Martin, Senate Print 6984A, an act to amend the Environmental Conservation Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 58, nays 2, Senators Ball and Laval recorded in the
The
negative.
bill is passed.
Calendar number 633 by Senator Grisanti, Senate Print 6988A, an act to amend the Environmental Conservation Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 57, nays 3, Senators Ball, Griffo, and Laval recorded in the negative.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 634 by Senator Martin, Senate Print 6991A, an act to amend the Environmental Conservation Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 58, nays 2, Senators Ball and Laval recorded in the negative.
The bill is passed.
Calendar number 635 by Senator Martin, Senate Print 6992A, an act to amend the Environmental Conservation Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 58, nays 2, Senators Ball and Laval recorded in the
The
negative.
bill is passed.
Calendar number 645 by Senator DeFrancisco, Senate Print 1790, an act to amend the Navigation Law.
Read the last section.
Section 5, this act should take effect on the 120th day.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
Bill is passed.
Calendar number 648 by Senator Ritchie, Senate Print 2113, an act to amend the Vehicle and Traffic Law.
Read the last section.
Section 3, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
Bill is passed.
Calendar number 649 by Senator Rivera, Senate Print 2220.
Bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 672 by Senator Felder, Senate Print 7210, an act to amend the Family Court Act.
The bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 707 by Member of the Assembly Silver, Assembly Print 9578, an act to amend the Real Property Tax Law.
Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 60.
Bill is passed.
Calendar number 716 by Senator Carlucci, Senate Print 1980B, an act to amend the Alcoholic Beverage Control Law.
Bill is laid aside.
Calendar number 722 by Senator Savino, Senate Print 3682, an act to amend the tax law.
The bill is laid aside. Senator Libous, that completes the non-controversial reading of the calendar.
Kemp?
Secretary will ring the bell as we proceed to the reading of the controversial calendar. Senator Libous.
If we could start the controversial calendar at number 553 by Senator Hannan.
The Secretary will place calendar number 553 before the House.
Calendar number 553 by Senator Hannan, Senate Print 5060A, an act to amend the education law.
Senator Hannan, an explanation has been requested by Senator Squadron.
Legislation that would clarify action by this legislature that we took in the 2013 budget that to make sure the intent as to how many physician's assistants should be employed or supervised by a physician at any one time. There's the PAs, the physician assistants in this state, feel there's a need for clarification so that as the demands upon the medical system increase, you know, we've had this We've had Obamacare. It's been relatively successful in the enrollments, both in private insurance and Medicaid in the state, so that we have nearly 800,000 more people covered by insurance than we did just before January 1. So this is a need to clarify this, and I would think it should be addressed by the body positively.
Senator Stavisky, why do you rise?
If the sponsor would yield.
Senator Hannan, do you yield? The sponsor yields.
Through you, Mr. President, line 4 of the bill says that no physician shall employ or supervise more than 4 physician assistants at any one time. Can you explain to us what the word supervise means?
What the word supervise means, I presume, since it's been in the law for a number of years, that it is the common sense type of thing of looking at the actions of the individual, providing guidance, mentoring, advice in regard to the actions of the individual, and all would be done in regard to the professional scope of practice of both the physician and the physician's assistant.
Would the sponsor continue to yield?
Senator Hannan? Senator Hannan, do you continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Does that mean that the person has to be in the same room?
I would think it would be a question of situation. If you're asking someone to do a task that's a matter of routine and you don't have to be in the same room, no. There is questions sometimes that arise as to what the various payment systems will require, Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, and whatever rules they would have. I'm not familiar, but I know that in other situations there has been certain rules that have to be followed, so they would have to be in the same room. Sometimes they can be in the same suite in terms of the medical practices. Sometimes they can be in the same operating room. Sometimes it's just the same building, but that would be, all has to be done according to the billing requirements, but that's not what this bill is doing. This bill is just dealing with the scope of practice.
The sponsor would continue to yield? In other words, we're assuming that supervision requires some kind of close proximity. Am I correct in that assumption?
I'm not sure. That's not something that I would be aware of. You're making the assumption that it has to be close proximity. What I think my answer to the prior question was is it depends on the situation.
Sponsor would continue to yield?
Yes.
Would availability via the internet be included in supervision? In other words, whether they can perhaps be in another location, would that include supervision?
I believe so.
Continue to yield? There are other professions that have similar requirements of supervision. The nurse anesthetists, the midwives, there are quite a few that require supervision. Would you extend this legislation to those professions?
I would submit that this legislation deals with physician assistants only, and that's what the discussion is limited to.
If the sponsor would continue to yield.
Senator Hannan? Sponsor yields. Senator Stavisky, a reminder to direct questions through the chair, please.
Sorry. Mr. President, the original version of the bill permitted 6 PAs in the practice. This is an A-print and limits the number to 4. Can the sponsor explain why the number has been reduced?
I don't have prior versions of the bill with me. I only know what we're doing with this piece of legislation that's before us now.
Mr. President, thank you for your responses.
Are there any other senators who wish to be heard? Seeing none, the debate is closed. The Secretary will ring the bell. Senator Libous.
If members could sit in their seats, it would be very helpful because the rule tells us that members need to be in their seats for a vote count.
Members are asked to sit in their seats. Also a reminder that there are a number of bills scheduled to be debated today, so members should stay in the chamber or near the chamber following this roll call. Call the roll.
Section 2, this act shall take effect on the 1st of January.
Sorry, read the last section, which was read. Now call the roll.
Addabbo, De Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 59, absent from voting, Senator Bonasek.
The bill is passed. Senator Libous.
We could now take up calendar 560 by Senator Hannan.
Secretary will place calendar 560 before the Senate.
Calendar number 560 by Senator Hannan, Senate Print 4509, enact amend the Social Services Law.
Senator Hannan, an explanation has been requested by Senator Rivera.
Yes, this is legislation that would direct the Department of Health to convene a Health Technology Assessment Committee so that there would be a formal input in regard to many of the proposed medical devices that are eligible for reimbursement under the state's Medicaid program.
Senator Rivera.
Through you, if the sponsor would yield for a few questions.
Senator Hannan, do you yield? Senator Hannan yields one question at a time.
Duly noted, Mr. President.
A lot of talking in the back of the chamber. If staff is here talking to members, I would politely ask you to leave and have your conversations outside the chamber so that we could hear the vigorous debate between Senator Rivera and Senator Hannan.
Conversations are asked to be taken outside of the chamber. Senator Rivera, proceed with your question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, Senator, through you, Mr. President, what exactly would the Technology Assessment Committee do? What exactly would they, what is the exact function that they would perform?
Drug Utilization Committee, which is strictly looking at whether or not a specific pharmaceutical product would be added to the formulary that's available as a preferred drug to a patient. This would be analogous to that, so that the many different types of health technologies could be evaluated, could be looked at as to the efficacy. Now, there's a certain amount of anything is safe if it's gone through FDA approval, but you also want to look at efficacy, so as how efficient is it in terms of saving steps, saving procedures, reducing medical costs, and then they could also be advising in regard to costs. But we have not put in costs like we've done for the Drug Utilization Committee.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Senator Hannan, do you continue to yield?
Yes.
The sponsor yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this process that they have to undergo to consider all that you said earlier, and obviously it's a very thorough list of some of the things that have to be considered, then ultimately the members of the committee would have to would make a recommendation as a whole. Would they take a vote internally in the committee? How exactly would they determine, after they take everything into consideration that you just described, how would they ultimately make a decision about what goes on that list? Is that something that is outlined in this piece of legislation?
Page 5 of the proposal, at least in my bill draft, is they shall consider matters related to it, notice on the website prior to the meeting of it. There shall be a description of the technology to be reviewed, the conditions, medical conditions to be impacted, proposals to be considered, opportunity for people to present, and there shall be notice of the coverage recommendation by the committee, and the commissioner shall give notice of the recommendation itself.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Senator Hannan, do you continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So that I still find it hard to understand. They're actually going to make a decision internally.
Recommendation.
They would make a recommendation, through you, Mr. President, they would make a recommendation to the commissioner, and ultimately the Commissioner of Health would make the ultimate decision?
Correct.
President, if the sponsor would continue to yield. There are, I believe, 13 members of the committee. Who would appoint those folks?
Who's Commissioner.
Through you, Mr. President,
of Health.
If the sponsor would continue to yield. Would there be any process that could perhaps influence who these folks would be? Suggestions from either the legislature or from other folks in the executive, or how exactly would this, what pool would these folks come from?
Pool, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Through you, Mr. President, would there be who are these folks, who exactly would they be? When I said pool, I'm referring to a group of people perhaps that would be more likely to be chosen for this role?
There's 13 members. Their usual term would be 3 years. There's an initial set of staggered terms. You may have reappointments. The membership shall be 6 persons licensed and actively engaged in the practice of medicine in the state, a person licensed and actively engaged in the practice of as a nurse practitioner or midwife, another person who's representative of health technology or medical device organization with a regional, statewide, or national constituency, and is a healthcare professional licensed under Title VIII of the Education Law, a person with a person with expertise who's a licensed healthcare professional, again under Title VIII of the Education Law, and 3 consumers.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. So if I'm not mistaken, there was a demonstration program that existed a while back that created a health technology assessment committee. Are you familiar, through you, Mr. President, is the sponsor familiar with this program, with the demonstration program?
I only vaguely remember it. It's not in my file.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I did not understand the answer.
I not enough to make a response based on what they did or did not do.
You, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield? So my follow-up question was about this demonstration program, whether it was successful and whether, why exactly it's taken over 30 years for the idea of it to be valid again. I guess through you, Mr. President, I'll ask a general question. Why has it taken, if this demonstration program, I believe, expired in 1983, why has it taken over 30 years to renew it if it was a successful program?
Because we had the Medicaid redesign program, where a number of changes were made or recommendations for changes were made in regard to different aspects that would come under this committee. The thought was that this was a specialized, narrow area of medical care. People didn't pay attention to it enough that we ought to have a regular basis. And so the thought was, after looking at what was happening with some of these medical devices, people were not able to get answers as to whether there would be coverage or not coverage, that we should move forward with it. And that's probably, Senator Rivera, why you supported this bill on the floor last year and why you voted for it twice in committee.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Senator Hannan, do you continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
You are correct. You are correct, Senator Hannan. Through you, Mr. President, I did support this on the floor before, as well as in the committee. I wanted to take this opportunity to make sure that all the different aspects of the bill that are positive certainly are brought to the public. So I wanted to make sure that we went through them thoroughly. Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
There is, I do have a question, though, about, through you, Mr. President, about the cost of this. Would there be a cost that would accrue to the state because of the creation of this committee?
I would argue that there's no compensation to anybody involved. I would argue you'd be using personnel, so that would be a cost. But I would think that a more focused study as to what would be effective in regard to healthcare technology would lead to, hopefully, both better healthcare, more efficient cost, and therefore we would have a general improvement, and that would be a savings to the system that we support with Medicaid.
Through you, Mr. President, clarifying that I only have 2 more questions, would the sponsor continue to yield?
I'll yield to one more question.
I have to choose one. Thank you, Mr. President. I could do a 2-parter. No, not really. Through you, Mr. President, if I'm not mistaken, this bill would repeal Section 365D of the Social Services Law. What is the need? Why does that need to be repealed with this bill?
Is That is the existing Section 365D, which you talked about, of the social service law, which was the demonstration program that expired 21 years ago. Or maybe even more, I'm sorry, 1983. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill.
Senator Rivera on the bill.
I thank the sponsor for answering the questions about the bill because, yes, I have supported it in the past. I will also support it today, Mr. President, because there's a couple of things that are positive about some of the things that we've been doing in the state of New York as it relates to Medicaid redesign and delivering health care to patients in the state of New York. In this case, as the sponsor stated, we have been successful in the last couple of years in taking what was increasing costs across the board and being able to flatten the cost curve. We've done a lot of things through partnerships, really, whether it was hospitals, with the state, with nurses, and with other healthcare providers, and we've come to agreement about what are the things that we need to do to control the costs of Medicaid overall, which was something that was incredible, something that was costing the state too much, and in future years would actually bankrupt the state. So we have been doing some things in the state to make sure that those costs are controlled. And in this case, as the sponsor noted, in this particular instance, we're talking about what are some of the things that we can do with technology to lower those costs even further. And we need to make sure that when we're making the decision about what technologies we inject into the system, that we do so with full knowledge of what these technologies actually are, and hopefully with the recommendations from people that know the effect that these technologies have. So the breakdown that the sponsor noted in the bill is a good one, because it fully takes into consideration different types of professionals that are doing this type of work all across the state. Hopefully, one question I did not get to ask was whether there was something in the bill that would make sure that we have different people from different parts of the state. Obviously, there's plenty to say about the different types of professionals that would be in this committee, but I don't believe that there's necessarily something about whether they would be from different parts of the geography of the state of New York. I would suggest that we also need to include that. But ultimately, these 13 individuals will be responsible for making recommendations to the Department of Health, to the Commissioner of Health, about what are the things that we could be doing to use technology to further bring down costs in healthcare delivery in the state of New York. And I ultimately think that that is a positive thing. It is unfortunate that this is not something that is passed in the Assembly. I'm uncertain whether this year we're going to have the opportunity to do that. I would call on my Assembly colleagues to consider that this is one of the many ways in which we can take costs and further push them down, never losing the sight and never losing the focus on the fact that we need to provide high-quality care to folks that are Medicaid patients or to all patients in the state of New York. So ultimately, I will thank the sponsor for not only introducing this piece of legislation, but for taking the time this afternoon to tell us a little bit about it and tell us why it was necessary. I agree with him wholeheartedly. I think that this will be a way for us to bring the intelligence and know-how of folks that are knowledgeable about the healthcare delivery system, are knowledgeable about technology and how those two things together could provide good and better care to people in the state of New York. I believe that these 13 individuals will take that time to give those recommendations to the Department of Health and to the Commissioner, and ultimately the Commissioner will make the choice. And I believe that this is a positive thing for the state of New York. I will vote in the affirmative, and I encourage all my colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Squadron.
To yield for a question.
Senator Hannan, do you yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
I know we didn't quite get through the fully exhaustive questioning from Senator Rivera, so just a couple more questions. I understand why this bill seems to make sense and have a purpose, understand why there was a surprisingly long delay. I want to know, is there a model for this sort of commission or this sort of work in other states?
I'm not aware.
Sponsor.
There may be, but it was not based on that. And No, I don't have information about that.
Sponsor will continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
If not based on models from other states, what is the model?
Model is the bill before us. The model is that we have a very vigorous healthcare system in this state. The model is that we have embarked on changing that healthcare system in many different ways, that we have a global cap that's saving money in general, but we've also been able to drive money towards needed aspects of it. We're funding over nearly 1 million more New Yorkers with healthcare coverage that we haven't done before. The model is we have looked at many different aspects of healthcare delivery, and we haven't had to copy from other states. We're doing it here. We have delivery systems such as what they call the HARP, or they call the FIDA, dealing with the people who have behavioral health problems or people who are dual eligibles. There's not really models for all of that. There's things you borrow, there's things you can do on your own, and that's what we're doing here. There are things, as I said at the beginning with Senator Rivera, we have a drug utilization board. We have tugged back and forth in regard to how it works and whether new drugs can be added to the formulary for the benefit of people in Medicaid in this state, how they're added. We've worked on the systems, et cetera, that they proceed, and based on that knowledge, we came up with this draft.
And if the sponsor will continue to yield. While I guess this committee is not based on another state nor a model in this state, I presume that one of its charges would be, and just to clarify this based on the prior answer, one of its charges would be to look at other states and how they have better integrated technology for outcomes and cost savings.
One of the charges is the efficacy of the device. And in order to do that, you're going to have to look at evidence and try to base it on what will work. There are a few places in this nation that are looking at drugs, procedures, and devices in regard to evidence based in Oregon. Those would be things that you would be self-evident to do because that's their charge. They're not for profits. They publish their findings, and they're available. Their findings are available for use.
Thank you. On the bill, Mr. President.
On the bill.
I thank the sponsor for answering those questions. Yeah, I would say that as we consider the sponsors truly encyclopedic knowledge of this area based on the responses and the need to assess the technology in the way that has been described, it's critical that we look to the way other places have done this, both at the federal level, the national, and other states at the national level. This seems on its face to be a reasonable version. I think I will be voting yes today because better to be trying to consider it than not. But I do think that the models that we use as we go through these assessments, as we create what are inevitably new bureaucracies and new structures, it is an important factor, and I do wish there was a little bit more of that here. However, I do think that when the sponsor talks about the charge of the committee and the consideration nationally, and in fact, hopefully the sponsor will take an active hand if this ever does get passed into law, because clearly brings a great deal of knowledge himself. I think that's a positive thing. So if this doesn't pass the Assembly this year and pass into law, I would really urge an additional further evolution of this that does consider other models of how we've done this, either in other areas in this state or across the states. But today I'll certainly vote yes in favor of the knowledge that's been displayed and the need to do something. Thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no other senator who wishes to be heard, the debate is closed. The secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 2 of this act shall take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, De Francisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin. Ayes 59. Senator Bonasek absent from voting.
The bill is passed. Senator Libous.
I believe we'll do number 567 by Senator Hannan.
Secretary will place calendar 567 before the Senate.
Calendar number 567 by Senator Hannan. Senate Print 7163, enact amend the public health law.
Senator Hannan, an explanation has been requested in stereo by Senators Squadron and Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. President. About several years ago, the state of New York, because of articles in a newspaper in New York City, put a limitation on the amount of resident duty hours that residents working in hospitals could work per week. There has been a growing questioning as to whether or not that limitation is effective in terms of providing a doctor who graduates with enough experience. Now, this is post-medical school, this is residencies in hospitals. As a matter of fact, outside of the state of New York, there have been several medical schools thinking that the comparable provisions in those states that put a limitation on hours did not have a sufficient evidentiary basis for an improvement in quality of the education of the physicians, and might have actually led to a deficiency in the education because this 80-hour rule would result in between 6 months and 12 months of less education to the resident who's becoming a physician. But this is not just something that is by random that we're doing here. The state of New York, because it has a law, can't just waive on its own. It needs this proposal before us. And why? It would be so New York State medical schools and hospitals could participate in a national study that's going on as to whether or not that 80-hour rule is effective. And how it's going to work is in a double-blind study that some residents will be assigned to continue the 80-hour limitation, and others will be able to go above it. And after a few years of this, there's going to be metrics using a federal system of outcomes for especially for surgeries, and they're going to compare the difference, the statistical differences, to see whether the 80-hour rules was a benefit or a detriment. And so this legislation is to allow our medical schools to participate in that. I might add that once you start participating in a study like this, the Institutional Research Board, which each of the academic institutions must have, will pass on the study in regard to all sorts of concerns about safety and privacy and efficacy for that. So there's a number of different benefits to this. This is a national trial that's going to start this summer, and we need to try to get this passed in order to allow some of our, and the schools that will be doing it are major schools such as Cornell Weill, and that's who came to us. The director of their surgery, the dean of their school, made the presentation, and that's why I introduced it and have it before you today.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would yield for a few questions.
Senator Hannan?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, why is it important for us to exempt rules and regulations from the Department of Health that have been currently established as this bill does? Why is that a core part of the piece of legislation?
Or are you talking about the law that's proposed or the explanation that I just gave?
Through you, Mr. President, I want you to explain to me, reiterate the reasoning why we are, if this bill is proposed, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President, if this bill is passed and signed into law, then it means that regulations that currently exist, rules and regulations that the Department of Health has established as far as the hours that a resident can and cannot work, as far as how long they can work at one time, how much rest they would require. If I'm not mistaken, this would waive those rules and regulations if we pass this bill and it is signed into law. I'd wanted to make sure that I understood exactly why such a thing is necessary.
Determine there is a growing thought in the field of medical education that the 80-hour limitation is not an effective rule, that it leads to people who could be better trained, and therefore one of the ways to go about looking at that criticism is to do this as an absolute study, controlled study, and a study that would have outcomes that you would measure to see if the hypothesis that the 80 hours is not useful, whether that hypothesis is supported.
Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Sponsor yields.
There's one aspect that I sincerely don't understand about your argument related to, through you, Mr. President, the 80 hours. You're saying that the 80-hour requirement actually lessens the ability of an intern, of a medical practitioner to gain training?
The thought is that if there was not an 80-hour limitation, that there would be more experience gained by that prospective physician, and therefore with that greater experience, which has been estimated to be between 6 months additional or 12 months additional, that it would be a far better individual as a physician, especially as a surgeon, who, once they get that final degree, can go and operate on any individuals.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
I'm sure that you are familiar with Bell regulations and what occurred to make sure that those were put into place. But just for the sake of, for the record here, could you state why Bell regulations were initially established and what they are meant to do in the state of New York?
I'm not going to get involved because there were a number of newspaper stories which led this legislature to decide it knew how to regulate medical education. But simply said, they thought less work would add to greater efficiency. There has been a large number of physicians who have said, no, the less work means less experience and a less trained doctor.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
Is the sponsor aware of the case of Libby Zion in 1984?
That's what led to these regulations.
President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
What was for the record again, what was the situation that happened and what was the result of that situation?
Put that on record. If you'd like to do it, feel free. I mean, there was extensive articles, there was extensive discussion, all of that point, but it comes down to the statute that we're amending was the result of that situation.
President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
The regulations that we're referring to, Mr. President, among other things, establish proper supervision for almost 16,000 resident physicians. I'm not on the bill, I'm going to ask a question. And second, establish safe work hours for resident physicians. So through you, Mr. President, is the contention of this, of the sponsor that potential efficiency, effectiveness, as you have said, one of the purpose of the study is to determine whether the interns or doctors, the medical practitioners would be able to learn more by working more. Is it the contention of the sponsor that potential efficiency through more work hours trumps safety?
No, it is my assertion, not contention, that that is a arguable fact and needs to be tested in an academic study.
Through you, Mr. President, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
Would you agree that what this study, which if I'm not mistaken is called FIRST, by the acronym is Flexibility and Duty Hour Requirements for Surgical Training Trials, would you agree with the statement that it would ultimately allow surgery residents to work for unlimited hours rather than the 27-hour limit that is now in place because of the regulations that we stated, that Bell regulations that I referred to earlier?
No, I would disagree with the word unlimited. First of all, there's only so many hours in the day. Second of all, you have, as I said in my original explanation, you have the oversight of an institutional research board, which is really charged with just looking at what's happening for safety of the patient, for safety of the participants in the study, and I would think that there would have to be a reasonableness that would be implied with that.
Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Let me point out, this is not something New York only. If we don't pass this legislation, the study will go forward in other states where they've adopted the 80-hour rule only by regulation. So that what we're trying to do here is allow, especially our major medical schools, to participate in a national study.
Again, through you, Mr. President, the sponsor will continue to yield.
Yes.
Is the sponsor familiar with the standards set by the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education, or ACGME? I'm not sure how to pronounce that particular acronym, but is the sponsor familiar with the requirements that the Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education establishes for surgical residents in particular?
I'm aware of them. I can't tell you that I've read through them thoroughly. I mean, I think I have upstairs in my office in the file those regulations, but they would be, they would be what one would expect in a regulation of an educational course in a technical field.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. These same requirements establish that residents have 14 hours off after 24 hours of consecutive work and at least 8 to 10 hours off after a regular shift. Would the sponsor agree that maybe there might not be double-blind studies of the type that he is talking about, but would the sponsor agree that at least there is a common sense argument to be made that somebody who is a surgical resident, who's responsible for surgeries, doing particularly delicate medical procedures, if that person has worked for 24 hours straight, that they should have at least 14 hours off or at least 8 to 10 hours off after a regular shift? Would the sponsor agree that at least that's on the face of it, a common sense?
All I agree with is I don't think that's a germane question. I would not be in a position to answer it, and that would be driving towards the original foundation of the legislation that we're amending today. But whether or not that's the case, I don't know. But I would tell you that you'll never get an answer to that question unless we let our schools participate in this study, where they will have absolute academic findings, and you can compare this and look at the results as to say whether it was better one way or the other.
Through you, Mr. President, the sponsor would yield for one more question. In general, do you believe that fatigue, you're not an expert, I'm not an expert in this, but do you believe that fatigue leads to accidents or leads to carelessness when someone is doing any type of activity?
I know when legislating it is the case. I don't know about practicing medicine.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill.
Senator Rivera on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the sponsor for answering my questions. And these, I believe, are this is a very serious conversation that we need to have. I will be in opposition to this bill, Mr. President. I voted against it in committee, and I will vote against it here on the floor, and for a couple of different reasons. While I agree with the senator, with the sponsor, that there is a need as much as possible to have evidence that is numerical in nature, that is backed up by research on decisions that we make about establishing general guidelines for all sorts of things, and certainly when it comes to the medical field, I agree that we need to have, we're not going to, for example, the FDA does not approve a particular drug unless there is all sorts of evidence in studies that establishes that that drug does what the manufacturer believes that that drug does, that it does not hurt the patient, that is actually going to be useful for the purpose that it's set to be useful for. However, I believe that we're dealing with something very, very specific, very particular here. Back in 1984, there was the tragic story of Libby Zion, who passed away as a patient, and based on all the circumstances that led to her unfortunate passing, there was a process that ultimately led to the creation of an ad hoc committee on emergency services that is known in shorthand as the Bell Commission. They came up with all sorts of regulations that address medication system, restraints usage, resident work hours, among a host of other things. It was this particular commission that came up with what seems to me to be a common sense limitation on the amount of hours that surgical residents are allowed to work and how much time they're mandated to have in between shifts when they're performing their professional duty. We're not talking about somebody trimming hedges. We're not talking about somebody legislating. We're talking about somebody who is ultimately responsible as a surgical resident for the life of the person that is before them in an operating room. I certainly agree with the sponsor that on most things and on everything that deals with healthcare and healthcare delivery, that we should have as much evidence as possible, as many studies as possible, to be able to make the best decisions about how policy should be set. But I believe that back in 1984, this was a smart way about that this particular committee went about establishing limitations on what these particular professionals are to do and how they're going to do it. I believe that it would open up the door to enter into this study, would open up the door to potential residents who work unlimited hours, and certainly maybe not unlimited hours, because obviously there's only so many hours in the day, as the sponsor said, and everyone is human, and obviously they can only work for so long, but that is precisely the point. Fatigue under normal circumstances, when we're legislating, and we've had the situations right here on the floor where we've been up till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and I believe that there's a picture floating around of when we were here the last day of session last year, and I was particularly sleepy after 20 hours of being straight, of being up, and most of it in this chamber, and I probably took a little nap right on this desk, and I'm sure that there's a picture floating around somewhere, and that was not my best day. But I think that when we're talking about whether we're legislating, it's a very different conversation to have than whether we're responsible for somebody's life. And so in this case, I'm going to have to say that this bill is not the correct way to go. It ultimately could potentially put many people's lives at risk, and I cannot find myself being supportive of this. So, Mr. President, I will be forced to vote in the negative. Thank you.
Senator Peralta.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the bill?
Senator Peralta.
While the full impact that the Bell regulations and other limits on resident work hours have on patient safety merit further study, that is no reason at all to remove the hard-won worker and patient protections here in New York. A recent study that was conducted shortly after the implementation of work hour restrictions found that residents whose hours were not limited made 35.9% more serious medical errors, 57% more non-intercepted errors, and were 6.7 times more likely to make serious diagnostic errors. The problem with many more recent studies is that instead of abiding by the spirit of these rules, hospitals have simply reduced hours while increasing workloads. This is a situation that calls for more protections for residents and patients, not fewer. We need to finally get to safe staffing levels for all medical personnel rather than exploiting loopholes in the letter of the law. We also need to look seriously at the 2009 Institute of Medicine recommendation that we further limit resident hour restrictions rather than doing away with them entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, this study will go forward whether New York is on board or not, because there are plenty of other places that seemingly care less than we do about hardworking residents and our vulnerable patients. So let them do what they're going to do. There's a reason why there's no assembly sponsor. There is nothing to be gained by New York following suit and much to lose. So in the interest of participating in a study, what we're saying is we're allowing hospitals to exempt themselves from limited working hours of postgraduate trainees. If 80 hours a week is not enough to sufficiently train residents/interns, I don't know what is. With that said, this just sounds like a way to exploit residents' interns, and in turn put them and patients in grave danger based on the stats that I mentioned earlier. It seems someone wants to go back to the good old days, which will only lead to medical errors, missteps, and an increase in lawsuits. That's what this will lead to. This is simply ridiculous. Mr. President, I will be voting against this.
Senator Stavisky.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I understand it, the legislation is to test.
Senator Stavisky, are you speaking on the bill or asking?
No, I will have a question in a moment.
Senator Hannan, will you yield to a question in a moment? Sponsor will yield.
I understand that this legislation is to test the endurance and the effect of long hours on a resident's work product. And after a lengthy time, presumably of treating patients, there will be a study of their reflexes and whatever else is involved. So if the sponsor would yield. Is there any reason why they have to use live patients when there are so many electronic devices that are in use where they can test all sorts of things without involving an actual patient? During the day, I might have been a little better with my question.
It requires really to go back and look at the foundation. And to tell you why I believe not only Senator Rivera but Senator Peralta are absolutely wrong. The occasion that my background with this issue was, and I did not introduce the bill on my own, when the people came from the medical schools, I did. But the background was a New York Times article, front page, last fall, which evidenced a growing concern by people in medical education as to how well or how poorly the newly minted doctors were. And one of the things that was pointed out was the limitation on hours. Now, the interesting part was I sent that article out to all the deans of the colleges in New York. And that, well, for the most part, there was one or two who said, oh, everything's fine. But for many of those deans, they either wrote or called me up, and we had some incredible discussions as to the quality of the physicians we're turning out. Maybe they would be extraordinarily talented, but they were not skilled. And especially when it came down to surgeons. And it's not totally addressed in just ours, but it was a question of whether or not they had enough hands-on experience performing operations so that when they got just past that day of graduation and they were out to do an appendectomy or something similar, they would not be hesitant. And it goes right to your question, which is an excellent one, because many of the medical schools now have the simulation labs where they will try to trip the students up with okay, we're doing a procedure, we're doing an appendectomy, all of a sudden something goes wrong. There's a loss in blood pressure, there's a cut into a wrong part of the abdomen, and there's an emergency to be handled. And they'll film this, and the medical student will watch later and try to learn from that mistake. That alone, however, says the deans, is not enough. For all of the simulation we have, there's nothing more than being in the operating room, seeing something happen, maybe there's an emergency, someone's come in through an ambulance, and you have to be able to respond right away. And the dean said to me, the deans, that's what we were trained for in the old days. It's not trying to push people beyond any endurance limits. It's trying to make sure that when they have these situations in the future, they're going to be able to deal with them because they've gone through them now. There's another part of this, which is some of these operations last 10 hours. Some of them last 20 hours. Sometimes they're done in teams. This bill allows for continuity so that if you're part of an operation that's going to go and take you beyond your 80 hours, you still don't have to leave, which can happen right now, where the result for the patient is worse than anything else because the person who has started the operation is not there to continue it. So we're involved in some very difficult questions here, but this is totally unlike anything I think we've ever entertained before, and yet I think that it's something that we ought to pass.
The senator would yield to one more question.
Yes, Senator.
Does the sponsor see an analogy between an airplane pilot who was asked to pilot an airplane long for hours upon hours, and what happens? He's practiced in the simulator, in the flight simulator. Do you see an analogy between that kind of fatigue and the training that the residents receive?
Not really. The conversations I had pointed out that there is a lot of things that happen to you when you have to start the operation, make a cut into the skin. There is a reaction. Your own blood pressure goes up. Your nervousness goes up. I have a lot of friends who are pilots. I think they've gotten over that very easily. I don't see that there's the analogy here that's total.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Through Mr. President, if the sponsor would yield for a question. Thank you. Could the sponsor tell me what the top 3 or 4 leading causes of death in America are?
I could.
Through you, Mr. President, would the sponsor tell me?
I think it's all relevant. No.
Thank you. On the bill, Mr. President. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention National Vital Statistics Report, with a specific number, October 10, 2012, the leading causes of death in America are, in order, diseases of the heart, 596,000, the malignant cancers, 575,000, hospital deaths due to medical errors, 2 categories, high estimate, 400,000 people per year. Low estimate, 210,000 Americans per year dying due to medical errors in hospitals. If we adjust that for New York State, since our population is roughly 6.7% of the nation's, a rough estimate of patients killed in New York hospitals due to error range from a low of 14,000 per year to a high of 26,000 each year. That's between 38 and 73 patients killed each year in our hospitals due to medical error. There may be lots of reasons for medical error, but it's clear to me that being exhausted and not being able to think straight has to be one of those causes. For the record, like many of us here, we may have had multiple marriages in our life. I had an early marriage. It lasted the 3 years of medical residency in a New York City hospital. It was pre the changes in the law. My then husband slept one night out of 3 out of his schedule. He was scheduled to sleep one night out of 3 per week. He was constantly exhausted. All of his colleagues in medical residencies were constantly exhausted. I didn't do research on medical error. I never have. I've read the statistics on how much medical error there is today, even under the existing law, and I can guarantee that I know when you are exhausted beyond comprehension, you don't make as good of decisions. And if you're a medical resident in a hospital setting, the decisions you make may be the difference between whether your patient lives or dies. Do I know if 80 hours per week is exactly the right number versus 90 versus 70? I don't. Do I think it's horrendous for somebody to start studying the question? I don't think so. Do I think New York State has to put our patients at greater risk by participating in this kind of research? No, I don't, particularly since we still aren't even doing the research right here in New York about what is causing the medical errors that result in between 14,000 and 26,000 New Yorkers per year dying in our hospitals due to medical errors. I would rather be discussing a bill that mandated research about the causes of death from those medical errors. And I think that would be a worthwhile commitment by this House and by the state. We know there's a real problem out there. It's just very hard to imagine the solution comes from even more overworked and overtired medical residents and interns in our hospitals. I will vote no, but I vote strongly yes for research into why do we have 14,000 to 26,000 New Yorkers dying in our hospitals unnecessarily from medical errors each year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. If the sponsor would yield to just a couple of questions.
Senator Hannan?
I'll yield to a question.
Sponsor yields to a question.
If we were to proceed with this legislation, it would to accommodate a particular study, it would seem that this might be the kind of legislation would be appropriate for some kind of sunset provision. And I wonder if, through you, Mr. President, the legislation would contains any kind of sunset language or ability to control how long studies can be conducted in subjecting residents to this kind of extreme work conditions?
No, because it's the study itself, by its definition, is limited for a few years, and it already has a sunset. Whether we get this enacted or not, I didn't think that we needed to put it into the statute.
If the sponsor would continue to yield?
I'm sorry?
Sponsor would continue to yield?
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
So the legislation is specific to one particular study and it wouldn't accommodate other studies?
It's participating in a national study regarding limits on the working hours of postgraduate trainees recognized and approved by the commissioner.
And one additional question, if the sponsor would continue to yield.
Yes.
Sponsor yields.
Is there any kind of disclosure to a patient
that they may have a resident conducting surgery or other kinds of things from somebody who has had to endure extreme hours? Is there any that they're participating in a study that allows the resident to exceed the regulations put in place by the Department of Health?
I would presume that would be done, because it's a matter of what's usually done when the Institutional Research Board, the IRB, sets out the conditions for how a study is conducted.
Through you, if I could just a follow-up question. Does the legislation anticipate that, or we're just hoping that there would be some?
It happens in every study. That's part of the national rules. I've experienced it in a number of different things that have been discussed, sponsored here. There's even sometimes where, and these academic institutions, because they involve research at all times, have their own IRB. But we also have a state in the Department of Health, an IRB that looks at things when there's just no other academic institution available. So no, it's not a hope for at all. It's a matter of policy.
On the bill?
Senator O'Brien on the bill.
It just seems to me that, that we're dealing with real human beings, with real patients here. I think one of the earlier questioners talked about, alternatives to doing extensive training and conducting this study without risking the lives of real patients. And I think that really is a question in this instance, and I'll be voting no.
Are there any other senator who wishes to be heard? Senator Peralta.
Mr. President, through you, if the sponsor will yield to a clarification.
Senator Hannan. Sponsor yields.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President. During the response to Senator Stavisky's question, was part of the answer that was when the deans of the medical school called the senator back, they said that there was no better substitute than working on a live patient.
In the essence, yes. I don't know, better substitute, but it was the best experience. Now, given the fact that there is use of these simulation labs widespread, that there is also considered to be a very valuable experience going through each of those labs.
If the sponsor will yield for another question, Mr. President?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. President. So, in the senator's opinion, would you say then that the deans of those schools would be encouraging individuals who are residents/interns to operate on live patients even if they have worked 13, 14 hours a day, because there is no best substitute than working on live patients?
You've assumed two things together, which are not part of any type of practice. You're assuming that you have an individual working 13 and going above the 80 hours. That's not part of our rules today in the state. And so I don't agree with that assumption whatsoever, because it's not logical.
Another question through you, Mr. President?
Yes.
Through you, Mr. President, but isn't this an exemption of the existing rules that we're discussing so that we can test these interns/residents on their stamina?
Not necessarily. Part of it is continuity, so it has nothing to do with stamina. And the second is I fully expect it's not going to be a trial by endurance. I'm expecting it to be something that we're going to see a better qualified physician at the end.
One last question, Mr. President, through you. Thank you. So I believe I also heard the senator say that the deans of those medical schools said that's how we learned it back in the day, or back when. So if there are new technologies that exist today where we don't have to put individuals at risk when an individual is so exhausted during an 8, 9, 10-hour shift, wouldn't it be wiser and smarter and less expensive to practice on these new technologies that exist currently today as opposed to those technologies that didn't exist back in the day?
Several different things. A, actually the deans didn't say how we learned, but I had last night, when I was talking to a group of doctors, somebody came up and told me exactly that, so that there is this belief in the medical field that that's the case. But second, in your proposition that you put forward as your question, you said exhausted. We're not necessarily saying exhausted. People are not necessarily exhausted at all. It's a question of whether they can be applying their talents. If you're exhausted, I would say that's a self-defeating end and you're not going to be there. Lastly, you talk about the new technologies. If there's anything as a new technology, we have extended operations that go far beyond what we've ever seen before. All because we can do things in terms of operations that were never done, in terms of transplants, in terms of repair, in terms of rebuilding. Those things were never done before, and they dictate that you would be there in the operating room for a greater period of time and have teams. So I don't agree that just because you deal with this, that you're going to have exhausted people. One is not equated to the other.
Thank you, Mr. President.
A couple of different things that occurred to me in discussing this. First of all, I was glad that Senator Krueger stood up and had those list of statistics as to what are the leading causes of death. And I believe you had something about either 3, 4, or 5, or 2 of those that were hospital-based. Well, let me point out to you, for New York, you're just making the case for my bill. Those statistics were generated since 1984, when the Bell Commission regulations were put on. All of those hospital-based errors were all done under the 80-hour rule. It makes the case that we have to have a better educational system. So that's what happens when you use statistics. Sometimes you got to think through what you're doing. Lastly, I don't believe that we should be restricting this. I believe that inquiry on an academic basis, to be measured by people who are in the business of doing education of physicians in this nation, is something our medical schools should participate in. We have some really great medical schools. If I go to name them, I'll eliminate a couple that I don't intend to eliminate. But they're all there trying to turn out more and better physicians. If anything we've had as a problem is we didn't have enough physicians. I've urged them to do that yearly, and we're finally getting those numbers up. So I don't think that this is a productive dissent from the support of the bill. I believe it's good to do. I think we should move forward on it, and I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Seeing no other senator who wishes to be heard, the debate is closed. The secretary will ring the bell. Read the last section.
Section 2, this act should take effect immediately.
Call the roll.
Adabo, DeFrancisco, Klein, Libous, Skelos, Stewart, Cousins, Zeldin.
Go. Senator DeFrancisco to explain his vote.
Yes, I understand the merits of the bill, but I'm going to vote no only because I actually had a son going through medical school when there was involuntary servitude, and a very, very dangerous situation. Secondly, the study that's being proposed can give us the results based upon other states that have over 80 hours, under 80 hours. There'll be plenty of data without New York, so I'm going to vote no.
Senator DeFrancisco to be recorded in the negative. Announce the results. Senator Stavisky to explain her vote.
We're not asking airline pilots to undertake this study because of the danger to the passengers, and I don't think we should be asking the residents to undertake this study because of the danger to their patients. For that reason, I vote no.
Senator Stavisky in the negative. Results.
In relation to calendar 567, those recorded in the negative are Senators Adabo, Avella, Breslin, Carlucci, DeFrancisco, Gianaris, Gibson, Hassel-Thompson, Hoylman, Kennedy, Kruger, Latimer, Montgomery, O'Brien, Parker, Peralta, Perkins, Rivera, Sanders, Serrano, Squadron, Stavisky, Stewart Cousins, and Katchik. Absent from voting, Senator Bonasek. Ayes 35, nays 24.
The bill is passed. Senator
Mr.
Libous.
President, could we lay aside the calendar for the day?
Rest of the calendar
And
is
if you
laid
could-
aside for the day.
Whoa, 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 we're not done. And if we could move to motions and resolutions and call on, I believe, Senator Savino?
Returning to motions and resolutions, Senator Savino.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 54, I offer the following amendments to calendar number 762.
Proceed.
Senate print number 6634A, and ask that the said bill retain its place on the third reading calendar.
So ordered. Senator Libous.
On page 34, I offer the following amendments to calendar number 569, Senate Brit 285, and as the said bill retains its place in third reading calendar.
So ordered.
Mr. President, is there any further business at the desk?
No further business at the desk.
On motion, Mr. President, the Senate stands adjourned until Wednesday, May 21st at 10 a.m.
On motion, the Senate stands adjourned until Wednesday, May 21st at 10 a.m.